It doesn't begin with lack of faith. It doesn't begin with bad luck. And it doesn't begin because the universe is ignoring you. It begins in a quieter place, inside the way you have been asking. Because there is a difference between a request that comes from power and a request that comes from pain. There is a difference between desire that rises from wholeness and desire that rises from desperation. And if you've been doing everything right, affirmations, visualization, prayers, gratitude, and still feeling like your manifestations are delayed, inconsistent, or slipping through your hands at the last second, the truth is not that you're broken. The truth is that you may be speaking two different languages at the same time, one with your words and another with your energy. Some people ask for abundance while subconsciously rehearsing scarcity every day. Some ask for love while emotionally preparing for abandonment. Some ask for healing while remaining loyal to the identity of being wounded. And this is where manifestation becomes misunderstood. Because manifestation is not about shouting louder. It's not about forcing the universe to finally notice you. It's about coherence, your mind, your emotions, your self-image, and your choices aligning in one direction. When they don't align, your request becomes fragmented. And a fragmented request cannot create a stable reality, no matter how spiritual your vocabulary is. What most people never realize is that you can absolutely believe in miracles and still sabotage your own. You can be sincere and still be misaligned. You can be devoted and still be asking from a frequency that quietly cancels itself. The hidden error is rarely obvious. It hides behind being realistic. It hides behind not wanting to get hurt. It hides behind trying not to get your hopes up. But every time you ask while simultaneously bracing for disappointment, you send a message that you do not truly expect to receive. And life mirrors expectation with brutal precision. So in this video, we're going to go deeper than surface techniques. We're going to uncover the silent contradiction that blocks quantum manifestation at its root. You will learn why your energy may be leaking, where your frequency becomes incoherent, and how to adjust it today without needing to fake positivity or force belief. Because once you understand what asking wrong really means, everything changes. You stop begging, you stop chasing signs, you stop performing spirituality, and you finally begin to ask from the only place the universe truly responds to, a stable inner identity that knows it is ready. When your desire becomes a signal of lack, there is a moment that almost everyone reaches on this path, and it's rarely dramatic on the outside. It usually happens late at night, in the silence after you've done everything you were told would work. You've visualized the outcome until you can almost taste it. You've repeated the affirmations until your throat feels tired. You've tried gratitude even when your heart felt empty. And then the question rises like a weight in your chest. Why isn't it happening for me? That question by itself is not the problem. The problem is what that question quietly implies. Because the moment you start measuring time and outcomes as proof of your worthiness, manifestation stops being creation and becomes emotional bargaining. Most people don't realize that asking is not neutral. Asking carries a frequency. Asking carries an identity. Asking carries an invisible emotional posture. And the universe doesn't respond to what you want in theory. It responds to what you are in practice. Not your personality, not your social mask, not your hopeful words. It responds to what you embody repeatedly. That's why two people can ask for the same thing using the same technique and get radically different results. One is asking with internal stability. The other is asking from internal collapse. This is where the hidden error begins. When desire becomes a signal of lack. You think you're requesting something beautiful, but underneath it your energy is broadcasting a different truth. I need this to happen so I can finally feel safe. I need this to happen so I can finally feel chosen. I need this to happen so I can finally feel enough. And that emotional contract changes everything, because now the desire is no longer a creation, it becomes a rescue. And rescue energy always carries urgency, pressure, and fear. It turns the future into a lifeboat and makes the present feel like a threat. When you ask from that place, you may still get brief breakthroughs. You may see signs, you may receive invitations, you may even experience those strange synchronicities that feel like a wink from something higher. But the results won't stabilize. They won't hold, because the state that produced the request wasn't sustainable. You were reaching from a nervous system that didn't feel safe, from a self-image that didn't feel deserving, from a mind that kept rehearsing loss as a form of preparation. And eventually, life will mirror that preparation, not as punishment, not as cruelty, but as reflection. A simple way to understand it is this: your subconscious doesn't speak in words, it speaks in patterns. It speaks in emotional repetition. It speaks in what you expect when nobody is watching. So when you declare, "I am abundant," but your body tightens as if abundance is dangerous, the body is louder than the sentence. When you say, "I am ready for love," but your heart flinches at intimacy, the flinch is the real signal. When you claim, "I trust," but you refresh your phone 20 times looking for confirmation, your action is the truth being broadcast. This is why so many people feel like they are doing everything correctly, but still stay stuck. Their conscious mind is working hard. Their spiritual language is polished. Their rituals are consistent, but their internal state has not shifted. They are still the same person asking for a different life, and that mismatch creates friction. It creates delay. It creates confusion. Because the universe doesn't simply give you what you want, it responds to what you are ready to hold. And the hardest part is that readiness has almost nothing to do with effort. It has to do with identity. It has to do with what you believe is normal for you, what you believe you can survive, what you believe you are allowed to have without losing love, belonging, or safety. Many people unconsciously associate expansion with danger. If they grew up watching money create conflict, their nervous system will treat abundance like a threat. If they grew up being punished for standing out, their body will treat success like exposure. If they learned that love means sacrifice, they will feel suspicious of peace. So when the moment comes where the universe begins to open doors, instead of celebrating, the nervous system panics. You may call it fear of failure, but often it's fear of success. Because success changes your life, it changes your relationships, it changes how people see you, it changes what you can no longer tolerate, it changes the excuses you've used to survive. And the old self will fight to stay alive, not because it hates you, but because it believes it is protecting you. That is why asking wrong is rarely about the wrong words. It's about the wrong emotional foundation. It's about asking while still emotionally committed to the old story. You might be saying, "I'm ready," but deep down you might be loyal to the identity of the struggler, the overgiver, the one who always has to work twice as hard to earn a fraction. You might be loyal to the identity of the person who waits, who hopes, who dreams quietly, but never fully steps into receiving. And as long as that loyalty remains unconscious, your manifestations will keep arriving at the edge and then dissolving, because life will not let you bypass yourself. If you listen closely, you can see it everywhere. People asking for a better life while continuing to tolerate what destroys them. People wanting new outcomes while defending old habits. People wanting divine favor while nurturing self-contempt. People asking for miracles while secretly believing miracles happen to everyone else. And none of this makes them wrong. It makes them human. It makes them patterned. It makes them conditioned. But it also reveals something powerful. You don't need to beg harder. You need to become clearer. You need to ask from alignment instead of urgency. You need to ask from wholeness instead of hunger. Because the most magnetic frequency is not desperation. It's certainty. Not arrogant certainty. Not forced confidence. But the quiet, grounded certainty of someone who no longer negotiates with doubt, as if doubt deserves leadership. When you ask from that place, the energy changes. The request stops sounding like an apology. It stops sounding like a pleading. It starts sounding like a decision. And decisions restructure the subconscious. Decisions tell your nervous system, "We are moving forward." Decisions tell your identity, "This is who we are now." That is why the deeper work of manifestation is not in the technique. It is in the inner relationship between desire and self-worth, between expansion and safety, between receiving and guilt. So if your manifestations have been slow, inconsistent, or collapsing right before completion, don't assume the universe is withholding. Assume something is misaligned. Assume there's a contradiction you haven't seen yet. And in the next chapter, we're going to take that contradiction out of hiding, because once you see it clearly, you stop fighting the process and you finally start becoming the person your request has been waiting for. The hidden contradiction that cancels your manifestation. There is a reason why this feels confusing. Because from the surface, you truly believe you want what you're asking for. You don't think you're lying. You don't think you're divided. You don't wake up and decide to sabotage yourself. But manifestation isn't interrupted by what you consciously intend. It's interrupted by what you unconsciously defend. And that defense often lives in a place you rarely look, the emotional contract you've made with your past. Most people think the block is external. They blame timing, circumstances, other people, money, bad energy, spiritual warfare, Mercury retrograde, or fate itself. But the real block is usually internal and invisible because it's been normalized. It has become the air you breathe. It's the way your nervous system has learned to survive. And survival patterns do not dissolve just because you started listening to spiritual content. Survival patterns are stubborn because they were built in moments when you felt powerless. And the subconscious does not forget what once kept you safe. This is the hidden contradiction. You ask for the new, but you are emotionally loyal to the old. You can hear that loyalty in subtle ways. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it sounds like self-protection. Sometimes it sounds like, I'm just being realistic. Sometimes it sounds like, I don't want to get my hopes up again. Sometimes it sounds like, I'm not ready yet. And sometimes it doesn't sound like anything, because it's not in words. It's in the body. It's in the tight chest when you imagine receiving. It's in the heaviness when you think of change. It's in the numbness that appears when you get close to success. Because deep down the subconscious is not asking, do I want this? It is asking, is this safe? And safety is the true currency behind manifestation. If your past taught you that visibility leads to criticism, success will feel unsafe. If your past taught you that money creates conflict, abundance will feel unsafe. If your past taught you that love leads to pain, intimacy will feel unsafe. If your past taught you that getting what you want makes people leave, receiving will feel unsafe. So even while you consciously ask for something beautiful, the subconscious whispers, not like that, not now, not too much, not in a way that changes who we are. And the moment that whisper gains power, your frequency becomes divided. That division is not weakness. It is simply two versions of you trying to lead at the same time. The version that wants expansion and the version that wants protection. And protection often wins because it feels urgent. Expansion feels like a luxury when your nervous system is on alert. Protection feels necessary. Protection feels justified. Protection feels mature. That's why this contradiction stays hidden. It is wearing the mask of intelligence. You can see it when something finally starts moving. The opportunity appears, the relationship shifts, the breakthrough begins to form, and suddenly, instead of ease, you experience panic. Instead of gratitude, you experience pressure. Instead of calm excitement, you experience restlessness. You start overthinking, you start questioning everything. You start scanning for flaws, scanning for signs that it might collapse, preparing yourself for disappointment before it arrives. And in that moment, you don't realize it, but you're pulling your energy away from receiving and putting it into bracing. Bracing is one of the most destructive energetic states, because bracing is faith in reverse. Bracing is the emotional rehearsal of loss. It is the body saying, I know this won't last. Even if your mind is still trying to believe, the body is preparing for impact. And whatever you prepare for, you tend to reproduce. Not because you're cursed, but because your system is trained. You move differently when you brace. You speak differently. You choose differently. You sabotage without noticing, because sabotage feels like control. This is why people get stuck in cycles that feel spiritual, but are actually psychological. They keep asking for the same thing, then feeling inspired, then feeling hopeful, then losing momentum, then collapsing into frustration, then finding new content, then feeling hopeful again. That cycle becomes a loop of dopamine and disappointment. And the mind calls it the manifestation journey, when in reality, it's a nervous system running from uncertainty and trying to reclaim power. And the contradiction deepens because you start blaming yourself. You start thinking you're not high vibration enough. You start thinking you're not doing enough rituals. You start thinking you're missing a secret. You start questioning your worthiness. But the block isn't that you're not good enough. The block is that part of you still believes you must earn what you're asking for through suffering. Many people have an unconscious belief that receiving without struggle is suspicious. That ease is temporary. That peace is unsafe. That joy will be followed by punishment. And so even when life starts offering ease, they create friction to stay familiar. Because familiarity feels safer than freedom when you've lived in survival. This is what makes the contradiction so painful. You're not just asking for money, love, health, purpose, or peace. You are asking for a new identity. You are asking to become someone who no longer lives by the old emotional laws. And that triggers grief. Not always obvious grief, but grief for the version of you that learned to survive by shrinking, by tolerating, by waiting, by hoping quietly, by never demanding too much. That version of you may have protected you for years. And even if that identity hurts you now, letting it go feels like betrayal. It feels like abandoning yourself. So the subconscious clings. It says, if we become different, who are we? It says, if we stop struggling, what will connect us to the people we love? It says, if we stop suffering, will we still be accepted? It says, if we receive more, will we be judged? And those questions create hesitation, even in the presence of possibility. This is why your manifestations may stop right at the edge. Because the edge is where your identity is tested. The edge is where you can no longer remain who you were. The edge is where you must become someone new, not only in thought but in emotional structure. And emotional structure is built through repeated internal states, not sudden inspiration. The universe responds to your frequency, but frequency is not just mood. Frequency is the stable emotional identity you practice. It's the way you return to yourself when fear rises. It's the way you relate to uncertainty. It's the way you interpret delays. It's the way you treat yourself when nothing seems to move. If your interpretation is always loss, then your frequency will always be bracing. If your interpretation is always abandonment, then your frequency will always be protection. If your interpretation is always struggle, then your frequency will always recreate struggle as evidence of life. That's why the hidden contradiction must be exposed, not to shame you, but to free you. Because once you see it, you stop fighting the wrong battle. You stop thinking the solution is more effort. You stop thinking the solution is louder affirmations. You stop thinking the solution is performing belief. Instead, you realize the solution is coherence. The solution is making the new feel safe. The solution is teaching your body, your mind, and your identity to accept what you've been asking for without needing to self-sabotage. And that is where everything begins to change. Because when the contradiction dissolves, manifestation stops feeling like a chase. It starts feeling like alignment. It starts feeling like inevitability. Not in a magical sense, but in a grounded sense. The kind of inevitability that comes when nothing inside of you is canceling the request anymore. We're going to enter the most practical part of this journey. The internal shift that changes your frequency at the root, and the subtle ways your body can become an antenna for the future instead of a prison for the past. When your body becomes the antenna for your future, there is a part of manifestation that most people skip because it feels too subtle, too quiet, too internal to measure. They want a method that produces proof fast. They want a technique that feels powerful in the moment. They want something they can do once and feel like they've activated the universe. But real transformation doesn't start in the moment you feel inspired. It starts in the moment your body stops arguing with your desire. Because your body is not just a physical system, it is memory, it is conditioning, it is the emotional archive of everything you've lived through and everything you've learned to expect. And whether you realize it or not, your body is always broadcasting. It broadcasts what feels safe. It broadcasts what feels familiar. It broadcasts what you believe will happen next, based on what has happened before. That broadcast is your frequency. And that is why the deeper work is not convincing the universe. The deeper work is training your own internal world to become stable enough to receive what you claim you want. Most people ask for a new life while living in the same body state every day, and that body state becomes the gatekeeper of their reality. If your nervous system is chronically tense, hypervigilant, or depleted, you can still want abundance, but your body will interpret expansion as risk. If your body has lived in survival for years, it will treat peace like unfamiliar territory. It will treat stability like a temporary illusion. It will brace for impact even in moments of joy, because that is what it learned to do to stay alive. That's why so many people feel like manifestation works in bursts but never holds. They get excited, they feel hope, they enter that high frequency for a day or two, and then the old emotions return like gravity. Doubt, irritation, fatigue. The sense of being behind, the sense of being alone with the burden, And suddenly the dream that felt close now feels distant again. It's not because the universe took it away. It's because the internal state that created the dream was never stabilized in the body. It was momentary, and reality responds to what is repeated, not what is imagined once. This is where the concept of coherence becomes crucial. Coherence is not constant positivity. It is internal alignment. It is the mind, the heart and the nervous system moving in the same direction. And the body plays the main role because the body is where belief becomes physical. You can think you believe something, but your body reveals what you truly believe. It reveals it through tension, hesitation, avoidance, collapse, overthinking, and self-protection. The body doesn't lie. It simply responds. So when we say your body becomes the antenna for your future, it means something very specific. Your future is not only created by what you want, it is created by what your body is willing to experience without pulling you back into old patterns. If your body associates love with danger, it will sabotage intimacy. If your body associates money with guilt, it will sabotage receiving. If your body associates success with exposure, it will sabotage visibility. Not because you want to lose, but because your system is still protecting you from the emotional consequences it expects. And this is where many people get stuck in spiritual confusion. They believe they are blocked energetically, when the truth is they are blocked neurologically and emotionally. They are trying to access a new outcome through an old emotional pathway. They are asking for change while keeping the body conditioned to expect disappointment. And that mismatch creates internal noise. It creates indecision. It creates inconsistency. It creates moments where you can almost touch the breakthrough, then something inside of you retreats. That retreat is not laziness. That retreat is the nervous system choosing familiarity over expansion. Because the nervous system is not designed to make you fulfilled. It is designed to make you safe. And safety, for your nervous system, is often equal to the past. This is why transformation requires repetition that is deeper than motivation. Motivation is a spark, but coherence is a structure. Motivation fades, structure remains. And the structure of your internal world is built through the states you live in most often, the states you return to without noticing, the emotional atmosphere you carry into your mornings, the way your body responds when uncertainty appears, the way your breath shifts when you think about your dream. Your breath matters more than you think. Not because breathing is a magical trick, but because breath is the bridge between the conscious and unconscious mind. When your breathing is short and shallow, you send a message to your entire system that something is wrong. Your brain scans for threat. Your attention narrows. Your imagination becomes fear-based. Your body prepares for survival. And in that state, you might still pray, but your prayer will feel like pleading. You might still visualize, but your visualization will feel like longing. You might still affirm, but your affirmation will feel like trying to convince yourself, because your biology is broadcasting contradiction. But when your breath slows, when the body softens, when you become present instead of braced, something changes. Your mind becomes clearer. Your emotional field becomes less reactive. Your desires become less desperate. You stop trying to force the future and start embodying the version of you that is already safe within it. That is not fantasy. That is training. And this is why people who truly manifest consistently don't look frantic. They don't look obsessed. They don't look like they're constantly searching for signs. They carry a quieter certainty, not because they're special, but because their body has been trained to hold that certainty. Their nervous system has learned that receiving is not danger. Their identity has learned that expansion is allowed. And that training becomes their frequency. The most powerful shift you can make is when you stop asking from a body that is waiting for permission and start asking from a body that already belongs in the reality you desire. That sense of belonging is the magnet, not because it tricks the universe, but because it ends the internal war. When you belong, you don't beg, you don't chase, you move, you choose, you respond differently. And those differences create a new pattern of outcomes. This is also why your everyday emotional life matters more than the big rituals. Manifestation is not a separate activity you do once in a while. It is the byproduct of your dominant emotional state, your dominant self-image, your dominant interpretation of reality. If your dominant interpretation is struggle, you will unconsciously create struggle. If your dominant interpretation is rejection, you will unconsciously anticipate rejection and behave accordingly. If your dominant interpretation is scarcity, you will unconsciously treat abundance as unstable and slip back into lack. So the body becomes the antenna when it becomes the place where the future is rehearsed, not as daydream but as emotional reality. When you can feel calm while thinking of your desire, you are signaling readiness. When you can feel grounded while imagining receiving, you are signaling coherence. When you can feel worthy without needing immediate proof, you are signaling stability. And stability is what allows manifestation to hold, because receiving is not just about getting, it's about sustaining. And what most people fear is not getting what they want. It's what happens after they get it. The responsibility, the visibility, the change, the loss of excuses, the need to grow, the need to become consistent. That is why the body must be trained to feel safe in the new. Otherwise, the moment the new arrives, you will sabotage it to return to what is emotionally familiar. We're going to go even deeper into that identity shift, the moment where manifestation stops being a request for something outside and becomes the decision to embody a new internal standard. Because once your internal standard changes, your external reality has no choice but to follow. The moment your identity becomes louder than your desire, there is a point in every manifestation journey where the question is no longer, do I want this? The question becomes far more revealing. Who am I allowed to be if I receive it? Because the real battle is rarely with the universe. The real battle is with identity. Identity is the silent script you keep obeying even when you think you are choosing freely. It is the internal role you learn to play in order to be loved, accepted, and safe. And until that role changes, your reality can only expand so far. This is why desire alone is not enough. Desire is energy, yes, but it is not authority. Identity is authority. Identity tells you what feels normal. It tells you what you can sustain. It tells you what you will tolerate. It tells you what you will sabotage. And most people don't see it because identity disguises itself as personality. It disguises itself as this is just how I am. But behind that statement is often a lifetime of conditioning. You may want prosperity, but if your identity is someone who struggles, someone who is always catching up, someone who has to prove their worth through exhaustion, then prosperity will feel like betrayal. You may want love, but if your identity is someone who gives more than they receive, someone who earns affection through sacrifice, then real love will feel unfamiliar. You may want peace, but if your identity is someone who survives by staying alert, then peace will feel suspicious, like the calm before something breaks. And when peace feels suspicious, the nervous system will create chaos. Not because you enjoy it, but because chaos is what you know how to manage. This is where many manifestations collapse at the edge. The universe brings you close, but your identity doesn't know how to stand there. Your mind says yes, but your internal role says no. And the internal role always wins when it's unconscious. Because an unconscious identity operates like gravity. You don't argue with gravity. You either rise above it with intention or you fall back into what's familiar. The most painful part is that people often think the collapse means the desire was wrong. They assume the dream wasn't meant for them. They interpret the delay as a sign to stop. But very often, the delay is not rejection. It is refinement. The delay is showing you the part of you that still cannot hold what you want. Not as punishment, but as truth. Because what you receive must match what you can carry without self-destruction. And if the old identity is built on fear, guilt, or scarcity, it will destroy what it cannot understand. Identity also shapes what you notice. When your identity believes life is hard, your mind will scan for evidence that life is hard. When your identity believes people leave, you will scan for evidence that people leave. When your identity believes I don't get chosen, you will scan for evidence that you are overlooked. That scanning is not neutral. It influences behavior. It creates emotional reactions. It shifts your tone. It changes what you accept. It changes what you expect. An expectation is one of the most powerful forces behind manifestation because expectation becomes the lens that filters reality. This is why some people keep repeating the same patterns even when they change the details. They may change relationships, jobs, cities, routines, techniques, but the underlying identity remains the same. And identity will recreate itself everywhere. It will recreate scarcity in new environments. It will recreate rejection with new people. It will recreate disappointment with new opportunities. Because identity is not attached to circumstances. Identity is attached to meaning. It is attached to what you believe is true about you. There is also a deeper layer here. Identity is often tied to belonging. Many people don't realize how much they fear becoming different. They fear prosperity because it could separate them from family. They fear confidence because it could trigger jealousy. They fear success because it could create expectations. They fear healing because it could remove the sympathy they once received. They fear being truly happy because they have been bonded to others through shared pain. And those fears aren't irrational. They are emotional realities built in childhood, built in relationships, built in environments where being too bright meant being targeted. So when you begin to manifest something bigger, your inner world may panic, not because it hates you, but because it senses separation. It senses change. It senses a new version of you stepping into a life your old environment may not recognize. That is why the identity shift can feel lonely. It can feel like leaving a familiar house, even if that house was full of emotional darkness. It can feel like stepping out of a role that once protected you, even if it now restricts you. And here is where manifestation becomes spiritual in the deepest sense. Not because it is mystical entertainment, but because it forces you to confront the core question of your life. Do I trust myself enough to be new? Because receiving what you want often requires becoming someone you've never been. It requires you to outgrow the emotional comfort of your old story. It requires you to stop feeding the version of you that survived and start nourishing the version of you that creates. This is why people who truly transform often become quieter. They stop announcing everything. They stop seeking validation. They stop needing to convince others because their new identity is being formed internally, and they understand something sacred. A new self is fragile at first. It must be protected. It must be stabilized. It must be repeated. And repetition is what turns a possibility into a reality. When identity becomes louder than desire, you experience internal sabotage as if it's automatic. You suddenly lose motivation. You start doubting. You become impatient. You get distracted. You start chasing new methods. You start needing constant reassurance. You begin to argue with the process. But under all of that is a simpler truth. The old identity is fighting to stay alive. It doesn't want to die. It doesn't want to lose control. It doesn't want to step into unfamiliar territory. And if you don't recognize that, you'll keep thinking the problem is outside you. The moment you recognize it, something shifts. You stop treating the obstacle like an enemy. You stop treating the delay like a curse. You see it as a mirror. You see it as information. You see it as the place where your inner world needs to mature in order to hold what your desire is calling in. And that maturity is the true adjustment of frequency. Not temporary optimism, but a stable emotional standard. Because frequency is identity in motion. And when identity changes, everything begins to change. Your choices shift, your boundaries tighten, your relationships reorganize, your tolerance for disrespect fades, your standards rise. You begin to move differently in the world. You become less reactive, more deliberate. You stop negotiating with the old life. And that decision, quiet, internal, non-dramatic, is often the exact point where manifestation accelerates. Not because the universe suddenly heard you, but because the inner contradiction dissolved. We're going to bring all of this into the practical rhythm of daily life, the subtle but powerful way consistency reshapes frequency, how emotional discipline creates spiritual clarity, and how the smallest internal shifts can open doors that once felt impossible. If there is one truth that deserves to stay with you after this video ends, it is this. Manifestation was never about convincing life to give you something. It was always about becoming internally coherent enough to receive what you've been asking for without collapsing back into old patterns. You were never ignored. You were never forgotten. You were never unworthy. What happened again and again was a silent mismatch between desire and identity, between intention and emotional safety, between what you asked for and what your inner world was prepared to sustain. When you understand this, the frustration softens, the self-blame loosens, the urgency dissolves. You stop trying to force outcomes and start paying attention to alignment. You realize that delays were not punishments, but invitations to mature internally, invitations to stop asking from fear, invitations to stop negotiating with doubt, invitations to stop performing spirituality while avoiding transformation, and most importantly, invitations to stop waiting for permission to become someone new. The adjustment of frequency is not mystical theater. It is emotional integrity. It is the moment your body no longer panics at the thought of receiving. It is the moment your identity no longer needs struggle to feel valid. It is the moment your nervous system stops rehearsing loss and starts allowing stability. That is when manifestation stops feeling fragile and starts feeling inevitable, not because of magic, but because nothing inside you is canceling the request anymore. And when that happens, life responds differently. Opportunities no longer feel overwhelming. Growth no longer feels threatening. Receiving no longer feels like something you have to apologize for. You begin to move through the world with a quieter certainty, grounded not in hope but in coherence. That is the real power. That is the real shift. And that is what turns a desire into a lived reality. Before this video ends, take a moment and ask yourself this question honestly. What part of my old identity am I still protecting that no longer deserves to lead my future? If this message resonated with you, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos in this series, where we continue going deeper into manifestation, identity, and inner alignment. And stay with me on the end screen to continue watching the next video, because this journey doesn't end here. It begins where your coherence does.